series. We are really glad to have as a special guest today one of the best communication specialists in Romania. She is Flavia Durach. She's associate professor at the National University for Political Studies and Public Administration here in Bucharest, and she's the head of the Digital Communication and Emerging Media Department. In 2023-2024, she acted as a rapporteur for the International Observatory for Information and Democracy, and an organization that aims to aggregate and synthesize existing research and offer policymakers global assessments of the information and communication space and how it impacts democracy. Of course, we can all agree that this is a very stringent issue of current days. And hello, Flavia, welcome. And we are looking forward to this engaging discussion.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction. A very kind introduction. I strive to be one of the, scholars of significance for Romania. I'm not sure if I'm there yet, but I definitely strive, and thank you for describing me as such. So I hope the presentation today will match the expectations, so to speak. It's great to see you again outside of the forum, where our interaction was less detailed than today. Together with Paul, we agreed on the following format. I'll have some, not theoretical, but let's say conceptual input. Then I have prepared an activity that will work as a basis for our wrapping up discussion and Q&A session. So we'll split it. I think we'll be here for 1 hour and a half, and I hope that's acceptable for your schedule. Half an hour, I'm going to try to present some issues, half an hour for the activity, and half an hour for the follow-up for the activity. So if you agree with this setting, I suggest we start. Let me
Yes, of course.
Identify how to so apparently Teams doesn't recognize the Microsoft PowerPoint app. I don't know why. Let me see what I can do. If not, I will share my full screen.
Yeah, or you can just give me your document and I will share it for you.
This is a small problem that I didn't. Okay. I found it. I managed to do it. Sorry, I'm not so familiar with Teams. Perfect. So, about the topic today. In different settings, usually professional settings, I've been asked, well, disinformation is as old as time. What changed? Why now? Why do you put such a strong emphasis on social media and the role of social media? You see my presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So today I thought that we'd have a look under the hood of social media. So how it works, how it gets us hooked, and with what consequences. And especially, of course, with a focus on what does this mean for the fight against disinformation. I'm not really familiar with your backgrounds. I don't know if you come from media studies in any way. If you come from media studies, I'm looking forward to your own ideas and perspectives. If not, I'm also looking for your perspectives according to your specialization, and I hope that the whole discussion will be of use to everyone. So let's see what makes today's disinformation more powerful, more potent, more significant, and the consequences for democracy so significant. These are some topics that scholars explored from multiple perspectives, and I'll try to point out the most important elements, so to speak. So, first of all, I want to discuss two interrelated concepts that can explain some of the structure of the public sphere today. networks versus hierarchies. And you have here the architectural symbols for the two concepts as per historian Niall Ferguson and his very influential book, The Square and the Tower, a book that I recommend, of course. So we have the square. This is a market of opinions, of ideas, if you want, if we are to translate the concept in the modern age. And the tower represents formal structures, the establishment, authority, rigid hierarchies. And the whole point of Ferguson's book is the idea that we live once again in history in an age in which networks are dominant, and we'll see with what consequences for our topic, for disinformation. So basically, what Ferguson says is that the world is shaped mainly by two forces that organize us as members of society: hierarchies and networks. The symbol for hierarchy, the chosen symbol, is the tower, and networks, well, the square, where people come together in a less structured, less formalized way, both literally and figuratively. So let's see, what about this? So what? Well, in terms of hierarchies, first of all, let's understand their features. So hierarchies are vertical elements in a society. These are the sources of official power and legitimacy. They are the ones that structure society with means of control, but I'm not saying Big Brother type of control necessarily, but they are elements of order, obviously. And hierarchies are the sources of structured vertical power. You can go around slide 6, Paul, if you
1 second.
want. Yeah. Networks, on the other hand, are the response, in a way, to hierarchies, in the sense that networks are a source of informal, not power, but influence. So influence, and they are the main environment for innovation in a society. As Ferguson argues, networks allowed us to construct modern civilization, to innovate, to push forward our way of living. And he gives some examples, historic examples. For instance, the patterns of settlement, the patterns of migration, great intellectual movements, and also social cultural movements such as Renaissance, Illuminism, religion. Religion is Christianity. The way Christianity managed to impose itself as a dominant religion is an example of a network working to expand its influence compared to, let's say, formalized power or the formalized religion at the time. Networks are vectors of change and are, if hierarchies are vertical, obviously networks and top-down, networks are horizontal. And they are very good instruments for transmitting values and ideas. And I'm not going to insist historically on the ages in which hierarchies were dominant and the ages in which networks were dominant. I'm going to skip to the point. The fact that there are great significant indicators that we live today in an age of networks, meaning that networks have now more importance, a greater role in shaping society than hierarchies, than the status quo, than authority. This is something that happens on a cyclical basis in history. Sometimes networks are dominant, sometimes hierarchies are dominant. The web, and especially social media, led us to a renowned importance of networks. And one of the maybe unexpected examples are the way terrorist organizations operate. But online social networks are a culmination of the network power and the influence today. And what's of importance to us? for the study of disinformation, but I had to make this historical introduction, is that ideas don't go viral necessarily because they are good ideas. They go viral because of the network structure that allows for that type of virality. And to give you a very practical example, moral panic, outrage, fear are elements that are heavily viral or reach virality on social media today, given the way social media is structured. And that has little to do with the quality of the ideas and has more to do with the emotional component of the message that you want to send. And if we look at disinformation, a lot of it revolves around negative emotions and the power of negative emotions to firstly draw attention and then to increase virality. And these are features that social networks today are designed to validate. So as Ferguson says, we can't decouple ideas from the structures, the networks that propagate them. And this is why we have to look at how social media, the most powerful way of networking people today, is designed to favor certain types of tactics, communication practices, and ideas that implicitly favor disinformation. So let's see. I think you can change the slide. I forgot to add that you can change the slide. Okay, maybe not that much. Let's see. We should. Oh, the implications come later. Sorry, I forgot. I changed the structure of the slides a little bit last minute, and then I forgot. I'll go back to the implications for disinformation, but first I want to introduce another concept so that we have all the elements, and namely the hype machine. Are you familiar with the book with the same name, The Hype Machine?
Actually, no.
Well, it is, if I were to recommend only one book about social media, I think this would be the book. It's written by Sinan Aral, who is an MIT professor, and also he was one of the co-founders of one of the first social media analytics firm. So he has a very intimate idea of how social networks operate, how communication, how messages spread, and also how we can sell on social media both products and ideas. And this is why I recommend the book, and it's also thoroughly documented, so it is a very interesting read. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, how do you relate to virality? Do you see virality as a value? So if a certain content is good, it's viral, is that a good thing? Is that a marker of some type of inherent quality of that content? How do you relate to the notion of virality? If somebody would care to jump in.
I don't think it necessarily means that it's better content, but maybe that it pushes some buttons, like it creates more dopamine in your brain or some other mechanisms that come in play.
Okay, so and if, for instance, I'm a content creator and I manage to go viral, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it depends from what point you look at it, because yes, you can gain like popularity and you can, I don't know, become more known, but at the same time, you are more vulnerable because you can experience cancel culture, you can experience a lot of phenomenon that can actually make you, feel worse than better than you expected.
I think you look from the perspective of the content creator, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we look from a societal perspective, virality is both a curse and a blessing. And that's also Sinan Aral's point. This is a machine. How we use it can become problematic. There are some positive aspects of virality. there is a serious potential to do good. For instance, I don't know if you remember the ice bucket challenge.
Yes, I do.
It seems that half a life has passed since then, but it's been only a few years. Well, the ice bucket challenge is an example of how finding ways to go viral can have a positive impact, because this was one of the most successful funding campaigns, especially for this type of issue related to serious diseases. So we are at a crossroads between good and bad with respect to viral content. But let's see what's with the hype machine, because I introduced this concept. Well, the idea is that we are now, to use a metaphor, we are now living in a house of dynamite, in the sense that, figuratively speaking, of course, we can blow up at any point. In the sense that social media, as a hype machine that we managed to build, amplifies artificially human interactions in ways that, in retrospect, we see are immensely harmful for societies and for democracies. The hype machine is ever expanding machine that spreads all across the globe, and that conducts the flows of information, opinions, and unfortunately behaviors. And let's have a look at how the machine works. If you want to change the slide, please. So basically, what Sinan Aral calls the technology trifecta is at the center of how the hype machine works. We have the substrate, the digital social networks. These offer the infrastructure through which ideas flow. We have the smartphone, so the medium through which we access the hype machine. And that's the problem with this instrument, is that it is always on. It always connects data about us, our daily habits, our preferences to an unprecedented scale. So experts in communication, and unfortunately people who engage in communication campaigns, can have a more in-depth, more intimate vision of us than ever. And smartphones and smartphone apps are optimized to keep us hooked, both in terms of interface and the whole system of dopamine-triggering notifications, gamified interfaces, and so on. And lastly, we have the most important part, the hype loop. Basically, we influence the machine and the machine influences us. And that leads to three consequences, or three trends that are quintessential for understanding online disinformation. One trend is personalized mass persuasion. So the hype machine has become and has been tailor-made in the last 10, 15 years as a personalized mass persuasion machine, with all the array, all the toolbox for that. And of course, it started with the need to sell products, but we see that the same toolbox is used for disinformation as for marketing. Hypersocialization, meaning that our social network, our social nature is taking advantage of. All our social triggers are pushed and pressed by social media apps to keep us engaged, to keep us attentive. We were not meant to be that connected, and this type of connection is continuously weaponized in information and disinformation campaigns. And lastly, that leads us to the attention economy. The main product that's monetized online, it's not necessarily us or our data per se, but our attention. And again, social media is designed explicitly to keep us as much as we can in their ecosystem so that our attention can be monetized. And that led to a very complicated setting in which we have influencers. We have the shouting factory that that social media has become in recent years. Journalism, needing to meet the virality and attention-seeking requirements of the platforms, changed practices, changed formats. Politics has been, I don't know, if we look at how current world leaders are doing political communication on social media, we see that style is what influencers do than what we would consider very serious and reason-driven political communication in the traditional sense. So each area of public communication has been perverted through these trends. If you can change the slide, please. Okay, change again. We are going to talk about the Hive loop. Okay, perfect. So I used this metaphor before. I don't know that if I used it during the forum, probably not. If I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But if we are to understand our interaction with the machine and how that interaction is limited, we can use the metaphor of a cat in an apartment. I have 2 cats, so this is an easy metaphor for me. So basically the cat, if you have cats, you know that you can't really tell them what to do. They are free to go everywhere, to scratch every piece of furniture, to, I don't know, go up on counters and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they are confined to the limits of the apartment or the house, if you want. It's only an illusion of freedom. Their freedom is restrained by the choices that we give to them. It's the same with machine intelligence in the Hive loop on social media and on the internet in general. Everything, the loop starts with machine intelligence that looks at our behavior. That's the sense and suggest part of the loop on the right side of the screen. So when we create an account on a social media app, or when we explore an AI chatbot, or when we go on Google to search for things, the first thing that the machine does is to sense our preferences and behaviors gradually, to feed us suggestions and to see how we react to them. So the machine provides the structure of our interaction with information. We can't go beyond that structure. We don't know what the Google search results don't show us. We don't know what videos are hidden from the YouTube algorithm when we search for something. We don't know what the For You page chooses to show us and why, and in detriment to what information. And then, of course, we react to that structure. And we have some agency in choosing what to see and how to react, but again, confined by what the machine decides to show us. And then we act based on the information we are exposed to the flows of information. And then the machine takes note of how we act and react, and the loop starts all over again. So it is an ongoing spiral that unfortunately sometimes leads, or frequently leads, to the creation of the so-called echo chambers in which disinformation flourishes. If we show a negative receptivity to something, the Hive loop will amplify our receptivity to that. So basically, I think it's sometimes it becomes a race to the bottom in the sense of radicalization, exposure to fringe content. And this explains, unfortunately, the success of disinformation and why disinformation campaigns are limited in their capacity to fight this phenomenon. Because disinformation is always in unethical ways tailor-made for the Hive loop and for amplification, whereas communicators have less measures to react if we don't tweak the way platforms work. And I'm going to show in a moment in what the solutions are concerned. You can skip some slides. You can change the slides. Thank you. Just a point to explain if we have agency or not. In Sinan's book, I came across a very interesting experiment. So researchers trained an algorithm first with positive content, right? Positive images. Then for the experiment, using the same code, so the same algorithm, they fed it in an alternative option with gruesome images, accidents, murders, everything that's bad. And after they trained the algorithm, the same code, the same programming with two different types of content, they asked the algorithm to do the Rorschach inkblot test. If you know, you have to identify shapes in abstract forms, and psychologically that tells the psychologist something about your state of mind. Where in the case of the algorithm, what you put in is what you extract, in the sense that the version of the algorithm that was trained on positive images learned to see positive images in the abstract forms, and by contrast, the algorithm that was fed with negative information identified negative information back. And that's an apt metaphor for how our psychological predispositions are amplified by the machine in the sense and suggest part of the loop as to amplify our predispositions. And this tendency is exploited by disinformation actors when they do a very good AI-driven, usually, reconnaissance of the context in which they are going to operate, create very in-depth profiles of digital users with different types of features, and then they can alter the content in different ways to create the personalized mass persuasion that I was talking about earlier. So it is the structure of social media. It's not the other way around. In a sense, we did not train social media to be like this, but disinformation actors took advantage of this structure of digital media. And now let's go to the slide about the implications, because I'm kind of running over time here. Let's see. So implications for disinformation, that would be slide 20, Paul, please. Okay, perfect. So first of all, the fact that we live in an age of networks, what does that tell us? Well, first of all, is that it doesn't matter if the ideas are harmful, they will still spread. They would even spread more than moderate content, objective content, unemotionally driven content. It is the network architecture that determines which ideas got the most traction. And for disinformation measures, that means that to some extent we can anticipate trends if we are aware of this fact, and we also can anticipate what type of content can become viral, and we can sometimes act to slow down the spread of that content. And also understanding the importance of networks and how social media works justifies all the measures to tweak the network architecture that the DSA and the DMA at the level of the European Union try to do. So this is regulation that tries to make the architecture of the social networks safer, so that we can limit the social harm done by the flow of ideas, so to speak, when that flow is weaponized in disinformation campaigns. So it's never evident that good ideas win. And that explains why, for instance, medical communication during the pandemic did not have, in Romania at least, the success that we anticipated, because it did not have the right features for the shouting machine that's in the internet, for the viral structure of social media content. It assumed that if we give people the communication in that period, at least in Romania, assumed on one hand that if we give people the right information, they will know what to do and they will make the best choices for them. That's on one hand. And on the other hand, they assumed that if you push authority figures at the forefront, it will be enough. But if we look at that communication problem from the lenses of networks versus hierarchies, we see that you cannot use hierarchy to communicate efficiently in the age of networks. It was still networked communication within closed online communities that was more successful for a large part of the population than was official medical communication. And we'll see when we do the follow-up of the exercise, we see what maybe partial alternatives we have to that type of communication. And in general, we have to keep in mind that one of the greatest challenges is the fact that extreme views will always get more traction than moderate views. And that's a challenge that, frankly, I don't know how to overcome. But of course, we can think of solutions together. You can change the slide and I'll wrap it up very soon. Unfortunately, the hype machine leads to radical interdependence between people across the globe. We are 6 degrees of separation to anyone from the globe. That means not necessarily that I'll connect with a Tibetan monk soon, but that means that in order for an idea to become transnational or global, it has to go through less steps than ever before in the history of mankind. And that explains why disinformation campaigns can travel so successfully across spaces, countries, languages. And of course, unfortunately, our responses to disinformation or to different types of information online research says, predicts our behavior better than what we think or what we declare in surveys. And if you can change the slide again, please. One more thing that we have to understand about the substrate, so the social networks that organize the flow of communication, is that they artificially create 2 things. First of all, clusters. So people cluster online based on the recommendations from the machine. People tend to cluster online more than they would do in real life. And that creates the perfect setting for echo chambers. Why do machines favor clustering? Because they noticed that if we operate in a bubble that's pleasant to us, we stay there longer. That's the point. So the idea is to bring people with a similar profile together in ways that would not happen in real life. It's artificial. And the second feature, homophily, meaning that these clusters in which people have stronger relations within the cluster than between clusters tend to connect. And that leads to the second phenomenon, namely polarization and amplification of real-life potential for polarization, of course. And as I said, the creation of ideologically based biased communities that basically have little communication between the clusters. And as a practical solution, but we're going to discuss more, we have to find out what are the nodes in the network that can bridge clusters, that can broker relations between clusters. Otherwise, polarization will continue to increase, so to speak. And we have to change the slide again. Again, please. Let's see. So social media has the potential, as I said, both for good and bad. This is not a lecture about how to delete social media from the face of the earth, but at the same time, I think that would be a solution. Gerald Lanier has said for many years now that we definitely should let go of the current business model of the internet, because he says, and he was one of the parents of virtual reality, I don't know if you know that, and he saw Silicon Valley innovate from the very early beginnings of Silicon Valley companies. And he says that the current business model of the internet is much more harmful than it is as a source of good, and we definitely should reform it if we want to survive as societies. I'm sorry if it's very gloomy. And now, if you are kind enough to change, I mean, I know you are, to change the slides towards the activity. So that would be an input. I try to, maybe it was a little bit dense in information. Do you have any questions now, or can we go to the activity?
Well, actually, if I may
yes, please.
have a short remark. You mentioned, thank you for the presentation, at least for me, even though I'm not quite new to disinformation realm and theoretical aspects of it. It's very clear how you presented it, which are the steps and the stakeholders and how, which are the mechanisms. You mentioned like extreme views that they are emphasized by social media, by the current way algorithms work. And I think that 2 weeks ago, it was for the first time I heard a concept, and I quite liked it. It is about critical ignoring, a sort of the other round of critical thinking, like we need to learn how to ignore the fuss, I would say, like ignore the extreme views and trying to find our own way and calm and of course regain critical thinking.
Yes, I mean, it's having an information hygiene has become heavily necessary. And at the same time, we need to have some type of reform, as I said, of the structural flaws, an overhaul, I don't know how to call it properly, of the structural flaws of social media, because social media works against us in this way. It works to keep us there, to keep us hooked. It exploits our social side in unfair ways. Experiments showed, psychosociological experiments show that we are so much a social being that loneliness is actually, neurochemically speaking, painful to our brains. And this is why the hypersocialization setting of social media is able to keep us engaged so much and makes ignoring the fuss much more difficult than, I don't know, without the current structure of social media. So this is why I am a big fan of regulation, which does not equal censorship or Big Brother. I know that a lot of regular internet users are concerned with that, and I would be the first to oppose that. Yeah, I mean, universities usually value freedom of speech a lot, but at the same time, we have these mechanisms that are so easily exploited by disinformation actors. And a lot of states have understood that the online is now the space for geopolitical confrontation, that we simply cannot ignore the way in which social media puts us in the harm's way. And let's reflect a little bit on these issues. And then I'll talk more about the solutions. But let me present the exercise now. So based on the lecture today, I basically extracted 5 claims. And I suggest you take a print screen or a photograph of this slide, because you are going to work with the claims for the activity. So these are 5 claims that are extracted, so to speak, from my lecture today. The fact that network structure matters more than content quality, that algorithms will always favor negative emotions and the noise that Paul talked about, a claim related to the attention economy, one related to echo chambers. as structural features, not as accidents. Oh yeah, maybe we have some flat earthers on a corner of the internet. No, social media leads to clustering, to hemophily, and that's the first step towards echo chambers. And mass persuasion has become personalized and also invisible to internet users, and it's heavily exploited. So these are the claims that we are going to work with, and I'm going to assign each of you a claim. So make sure that you have them at hand. Of course, I can show them to you again. Now, if you want to change the slide, please. And let's see, starting with the background, so each of the claims, we have a practical scenario. That's the same for everyone, only the claims will differ. So the scenario is that we have a story that goes viral on social media, that new EU regulation will triple our energy bills and will destroy jobs. And the story is amplified by human agents, but also by algorithmic recommendations, and it's targeted in tailor-made shapes and forms for different groups that could be receptive to this information. And you are part of a response team. You will have to design measures, but we are going to discuss those measures. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you without a follow-up. But the catch is that each of you will have to focus on measures that take into account one of the 5 claims, the claim that I assigned to you. If you want, please, Paul, to go back to the claims. So, for instance, if I assign to you the claim number 3, that attention-based algorithms systematically favor outrage, I see now there is an overlap with claim 2 a little bit. I apologize for that. That's my mistake. So if we focus on claim number 3, you'll have to design a solution, a response measure for your scenario that accounts or tries to counter this problem, that attention-based algorithms systematically favor outrage. And you are allowed to envisage solutions under a whole of society approach. So you can think of ways to collaborate with the platforms or other elements from the civil society. You are not working on or alone on this. You want to solve the solution, taking into account multiple international or national organizations that can support and help your strategy. Change the slide again, please. So let's see again. Okay, so each of you will design an intervention for one claim, and you'll have to think of the issues here. What is the structural problem? How can we intervene in a realistic way? And one concrete action for that. But as I said, you have some constraints. So, for instance, you can't engage in censorship. We are working in a democratic framework. You don't have control over the information space, but as I said, you can collaborate with platforms, with other institutions. You have to work within the system, not against the system, because that's what happens in practice. And I suggest each of you will receive a claim. Let me see. Paul, if you can stop sharing so that I see the participants better, so that I can assign the claims. Okay, so let's see. Bianca is the first on my screen. So Bianca, you'll get claim number 1. Network structure matters more than content quality.
Okay, thank you.
Roxana, you are going to use claim number 2, but don't focus on outrage. In particular, focus on emotion in general, because the third one will focus on outrage. So attention-based algorithms favor emotional content more than neutral content. That's your claim, basically.
Yeah,
okay, Alexander, your claim is that attention-based algorithms favor outreach and fury and fear as very strong negative emotions. Jonjo, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is that all right? Okay, you have the fourth one. Echo chambers and filter bubbles are structural features, not occasional bugs. And lastly, we have three more participants. Let's see. Nicoletta, mass persuasion has become personalized and invisible to the regular user. And we have Claudia. Claudia, let's circle back to the first claim then. Network structure matters more than content quality. That's the problem that you have to tackle. And lastly, we have Savannah. Savannah, you choose, I'm going to assign you, sorry, the fifth one. Mass persuasion has become personalized and invisible to the regular user. Okay, so I suggest you take 20 minutes to work on the task. If you have questions about the task, please tell me and I'll help you. And after 20 minutes, we'll wrap up the discussion in the sense that we'll discuss the results. I'm going to answer the questions that I received beforehand. And I'm looking forward to your ideas, and I'm going to chip in if you don't cover everything, but I'm optimistic. Maybe you will cover everything there is to say. Okay, Alexander, you had a question.
Yes, sorry, Flavia. I have a question. What is the difference between the second and the third one? Because they are both attention-based algorithms, systematically favor outreach. But what exactly is the difference?
That's a mistake that I have to
okay.
openly recognize. So let's split them. The second one is about how social media favors emotion instead of neutral content. And the third claim will focus exclusively and in particular to negative emotion. Sorry, that's my mistake, as I said. It's an oversight of mine. Okay, so if you have questions while you think of these issues, let me know. And if you are done, maybe leave a comment that you are done. So if everybody finishes up earlier, I don't want just to sit around with no point. I prefer to discuss it. So if you are done, just write, I'm done. And if not, we are going to discuss after 20 minutes. Okay, so I suggest we reconvene. Are you back? Can you please turn on your cameras if you can, or just say that you are back so that we know we can start our discussion? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I suggest, first of all, I suggest we stop sharing so that we can see each other properly on the screen. I do have a slide with some points for potential solutions that are tied not in general to everything we can do to counter disinformation, but what we can do in connection to what we discussed today. So this is the frame for our discussion. Only those measures that are connected to today's topic. We can start by taking the problems point by point. So one of the first points was that the features of the network with respect to the circulation of information matter more than the quality of the content. And from this perspective, what type of interventions would you feel useful? Of course, I suggest that the people who had this problem to respond, but everybody can contribute, of course. It's not limited to them. So what are your ideas based on this?
Can I start?
Yes, but since we don't have a lot of time, I propose that everybody speak in elevator pitches. So be very brief and convincing in your choices.
Okay, Claudia, you go first, and then I will go second.
Okay, so for the first question, I thought that network structure matters more than content quality, unfortunately, because sometimes the way you promote your content is more effective than the idea you're trying to promote. So it might be a bad idea, but if you promote it right way, then can become viral. So your voice is more easily to be heard. So
starting from our scenario, what would be the right way to promote the content?
I think you should search if you have qualified information to share. Otherwise, you shouldn't do that. I think. I don't know.
So let's have a look. It is a claim that can be contradicted, but at the same time, since it's chosen strategically in a way because it targets something that at least in Romania we have a lot of, namely distrust in the political establishment. So any denial of this claim will not necessarily be successful. It's a type of information that you can easily correct, but not necessarily in a way that's convincing for the audience. So maybe you have something to add to this first point? Anybody?
So on this first point, I focus on the solution more rather than bring the claim. So I can say that it tries. I identify the problem because it tries because of the network architecture. So for instance, it is trapped, as you mentioned at the beginning of presentation, about echo chambers, and I thought that maybe it is like inside of an isolated echo chamber, and because of that, we can target like the specific algorithm behind it, like the connections and the bridges that it has. And the concrete actions that I was thinking is to come from the European Union, to have regulations that come from the European Union that are like fact checked and that work with researchers and that can tap in basically to identify the algorithm and stop it so that it is no longer available in the social media apps. And this can like trigger the network and resolve maybe the problem. Let's hope.
Okay, let's see. I think it's a good starting point, what you suggest. So first of all, what I'd like to recommend is that you always track the pathway through which certain types of disinformation or fake claims circulate. You need to understand the network that pushes it. Understanding the network helps you, on one hand, find examples of or evidence of inauthentic coordinated behavior. So for instance, pages and actors and influencers that push a certain claim or narrative in coordination while hiding that coordination. If you are attentive enough in your network modeling, you can identify that network and you can dismantle it. That would be one thing. And the other thing from the perspective of countermeasures is that it's always useful to identify the nodes. So I was saying that in a network, people tend to cluster in similar like-minded groups in a way, or information universes, bubbles. If you are able to find influencers that can reach multiple clusters at the same time, those are very important vectors of opinion, and you can co-opt them in your countering campaign. They have the chance, and also it's very useful to provide a type of information that closes the gap between the clusters rather than expanding it. So if you respond to polarized information with more polarizing information, you'll keep talking to yourself. in a way. So that would be one thing. So you should prioritize inoculation against this information through trusted nodes inside the clusters, or influencers if you want, or digital opinion leaders. Not to use only official channels to debunk a certain fake claim, but also look at what happens within the communities, online communities where that claim circulates. Otherwise, the message won't reach its audience. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just talking about how we can approach it. Okay, let's see. And also, always rebuttals should travel along the same network paths as the false content. Otherwise, it's pointless. Let's see, the second one. Emotional content is favored as compared to neutral content. That's what happened during the pandemic, by the way. During the first months of the pandemic, research shows that information coming from disinformation sources was 6 times more visible than information coming from the 10 leading health organizations in the world, including the World Health Organization. Sometimes even more than 6 times, 10 times, it depends, it was variable. So what can we do about that? What are your ideas?
So for the second point, sorry for having turned off my camera. My network provider turns off my internet after 7 p.m. every day for some reason.
No problem.
So it's interesting, the nature of this emotional side, because it's not emotional in the same way that an accident brings out emotion. It's emotional because it creates this threat to your life or to the way you live. And I believe that a solution would be to not let users react to it immediately, to the emotion, and add an extra step or a label on platforms, like this information is not verified, for example. And also for the institutions to communicate properly and quickly. And maybe, I don't know if it's correct, but I would say that kind of use the same tone that was used to spread misinformation, not communicate in a very rigid way, I would say, but in a very human way. Yeah.
That is a good point, indeed, in the sense that, being very rigid in your communication is definitely not working to gather the attention of the audience. However, it is true that we can't use the same language, because usually the language of disinformation is quite violent or exaggerated, but we need to take emotion into account, of course, and to try to understand the emotions of the audience and how to respond through communication to those emotions, because indeed disinformation is meant to elicit strong emotions. And as you say, people are more prone to share disinformation when they are influenced by their emotions. And this is why introducing steps that would delay the response, just as you say, can work. And evidence on labeling and other types of measures is that in certain situations they work. Of course, they are not a standalone measure, but they contribute to that. The liability is that in this type of intervention, you have to ensure the collaboration of the networks to put on the labels, to mark content, to maybe create extra steps before sharing, such as asking the user, the information is not verified, are you sure you want to share, things like that. Or fact checkers have rejected or have debunked this information, or so on and so forth. So that would be the difficulty. But indeed, since the platform nudges you to react to information, because reaction creates engagement, you should also nudge the users in ways that favor accuracy-oriented behaviors. Think twice, read the whole story first. You should reward reflective actions, pauses. That's why one of the most famous campaigns of media literacy was entitled "Pause Before You Share." But unfortunately, I'm not sure that people are really pausing. There's something that we need to fight some more on. Let's see. The third claim was about the power of negative emotions. We did an experiment together with my colleagues at the university. We did an experiment that basically builds on pre-existing research, of course. And our experiment showed that negative emotions mediated the decision to share this information. Mediated in the sense that contributed to the decision to share, and in turn to the virality of content. And we used, in our experiment, we used political news, economic news that was framed in negative, positive, or neutral factual ways. And it was, we've seen some experimental effects only with respect to the negative emotions. How would you respond to that?
So regarding the third one, yes, I'm not sure what exactly the best measure would be, but I think that direct messaging, for example, that this information is false is not the best option, because this is a more defensive position, and also this would result in more engagement, so more likes, more comments, and this will actually make the false news even more popular than it was before. So I think maybe it should be counter-replied with some simple visuals or something like this, but not directly listing facts, because social media very often does not rate very high accuracy and rational thinking, but rather emotions and rather instincts that are triggered very easily. So yeah.
Thank you. It's a very good point that you highlighted the difficulty in fighting this. Paul, you wanted to add something, but I don't know at what point. But you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, to the previous point, but I think it's also valid for this point. You mentioned some measures, some platforms measures to slow down the process of communication, and I was actually thinking maybe one of the measures could be the fact that if you react or overreact, because as you said, platforms know our behavior, they have our history, they know to what type of content we react, and if we overreact to those type of attention-based and emotion-triggered information on platforms, posts, let's just call them posts, maybe a good measure would be to ask the platforms, we as regulators or as governments, to ask the platforms to provide us a minimum post of opposite or neutral feed. Meaning that stop the feed, at least have the perspective from the other side. It's your choice. It still remain your choice to have an opinion and form an opinion on that issue, but at least be, let's just say, obliged to have an opposite perspective. That was my intervention.
That is a good point indeed, and it's connected to both the problems. So there are many types of interventions that can be related to understanding the impact of emotion. One is to detox the algorithm, as you say. Facebook tried that, well, now currently Meta, tried that to some extent. At the beginning of the emojis, they created the emojis to understand more about our emotions with respect to content. It was very important for them to understand our emotions, to understand how to feed us engaging content. That was always the point. And at some point, during public scrutiny about their practices and criticism, they decided to allocate to negative emotions 0 points, so to speak, in order to detox the algorithm a little bit. In the sense that, for instance, if a piece of content triggered negative emotions, let's say fear, that weighted in the importance of that content 4 times more than a simple like, which was a neutral emotion. They consider the like a neutral emotion, and if you expressed angry emojis, they would push that content 4 times more to the audience because they reached the conclusion that, well, that's an engaging practice. Theoretically, they try to turn off some of the emotional content in their platform, but I think in practical terms, emotion is still currently very much supported by the architecture of the networks. So in terms of regulation enforcement, that would be definitely necessary. Another way that you can work around this issue is to engage in media literacy that makes audiences more aware of this type of psychological, not necessarily manipulation, but sometimes it can be, but at least nudges. And users need to understand that they are the active trainers of algorithms. And I think we need to have more media literacy on that idea. Let's see, what can we do about echo chambers, filter bubbles as structural features?
I think this is mine, and I'll keep it brief as I think we're coming quite time constrained. But I thought the structural issue with echo chambers. So can you hear me, by the way? Is it coming?
Yes, of course, perfectly.
So they basically create these homophilous clusters, which results in people being in these small communities where they are informationally segregated. They're not shown any opposing views, and in this practical example, I guess it would mean that that this disinformation regarding the EU plans are only found in kind of highly politicized anti-EU like online communities, which obviously is difficult for one, people trying to address it because they might not even know it exists, and two, even if they do produce content contradicting this, it won't be seen in these communities because of this of these echo chambers. Regarding the where we can intervene, I thought the interface. From what I understand that's kind of what the users see or how they really interact with the platform. And an idea I had was so on TikTok, I think relatively recently they started to bring at the bottom of videos kind of contextual links. So kind of providing which link users to further information on what was mentioned in that video. So what I was thinking is that social media companies could be mandated to include these sort of links to the more mainstream or alternative viewpoints as almost a bridge out of the echo chamber. It doesn't force people to do it. It doesn't censor the content, but it at least gives them a way out.
Thank you so much for your idea. I think it's very good with some caveats, of course, like everything that we discussed today. Not everything that we should do ideally is also enforceable 100% in practice. But with respect to echo chambers, if the communities are heavily radicalized, there is little you can do, unfortunately. So a part of the general population will be lost in a sense. What you can do is, of course, I'm sorry, I hope it's not controversial what I'm saying. If this type of echo chambers are in some way risky to national order, they should be surveilled to some extent, and the threat should be continuously assessed. I'm thinking of movements that can go towards violence, maybe, or going against law and order in some way, but these are the most extreme cases. For the rest, it's very difficult anyway to change their opinions. But if you have communities that are ideologically biased or polarized, but in a milder ways, for sure what you suggest can help. You can help people expand their information constellation universe or bubble. And of course, it's going back to the network analysis, it's useful to find people that can connect these groups in ways that are acceptable for all groups involved. And I think I'm going to anticipate the answer to one of the questions that were listed. That was related to, I'm not sure how it was formulated, but the idea was what do we do with communities that are very, I don't know, their perspectives diverge significantly from reality, as the person who asked the question says. What do we do? Disinformation emerges in these communities. Well, a principle of persuasion is that you must never attack the core values and the system, the views of the person. If you do that, you lose the person. The same with online communities that have similar features. You don't attack their core values, but maybe you can find communicators that the polarized groups may find acceptable, people that can bridge the gaps, people that are not controversial for these groups, who can spread the message in a milder way. It never helps to despise this type of communities. Sometimes in political communication, I noticed a tendency to look at the biased, radicalized communities in an offensive manner, offensive to them, I mean. That's not the way. You need some diplomacy. Some curated messages that don't attack the core values of that group can be a way of expanding that group's views to new ideas. And you can challenge their entrenched views little by little. You can't start by saying we have to federalize the EU and you are stupid if you believe otherwise. You can start with smaller nuggets of information. Again, finding communicators that won't be received with very strong opposition. Going back to the communication during the pandemic, if containment measures were communicated mainly by government officials, you had a very strong opposition coagulating on social media, and that was connected to trust in institutions. So our research showed that one of the main predictors for not following the guidelines during the pandemic, including vaccination, was distrust in institutions. So that's what I mean by people who are accepted or not by those communities. In other countries, for instance, communication was left more in the hands of health professionals, and it worked a little bit better. I'm not criticizing the strategy of the government during the pandemic. We're just reflecting on some issues that could have been improved in hindsight, so to speak. Okay, and for the last claim about the tools of mass persuasion that are heavily employed, I'm going to give you an example, a very famous example, the ISIS terrorist organization. And in general, terrorist organizations in the era of social media famously employ entertainment techniques and marketing techniques to spread their ideas and to recruit new subjects in areas that you wouldn't expect, including in Western societies. And because social media is both information and entertainment, so their communication famously mixed some type of coolness, entertainment in their ideological messages. And that's one example of how in storytelling, and I'm going to connect that to the other question that I received. It was a question about narratives, right? So pieces of fake news usually build two larger narratives, as you identified correctly. If storytelling is a good marketing technique, storytelling can also be a good way to counter these narratives, because themselves, the disinformation narratives rely heavily on storytelling. Okay, so that would be another point related to marketing tools and techniques. You can also employ them for good. But I wanted to hear your ideas as well. I kind of started myself. I didn't intend to respond to my own questions. So what's your views about mass persuasion techniques and how to respond to them?
I can start. Firstly, I was thinking, because you said that they took instruments from marketing and use them for disinformation to counteract what's happening. We can also take different type of policies from other domains and try to implement them in this social online space. And my idea was that, of course, you cannot go to people and tell them, hey, you are manipulated. This is what the truth is. Like you said before, this would never work. But I believe that in a way or another, we can intervene in regards to behavior. In the idea that, for example, if I make an analogy to the policies, public policies on drugs, usually you don't go and punish the consumer, you go and try to find the actual traffickers. The same way, I think, I don't know, political leaders, either at the EU level or the national level, they could find a way to impose to these social platforms way of monitoring better the behavior of certain accounts. So in the idea to find way quicker which are the accounts that post thousands or millions of posts per day, and try in a way to stop viralizing that content, or even, I don't know, delete it if it's doubled or tripled or whatever. This can be, I don't know, done imposed directly on the platforms, or maybe there can be outside, I don't know, task force that can do that. For example, like there is audit in companies, it could be something like that that could report back to political leaders, and they decide what they want about those platforms. That what I was thinking about, the idea to like in war and in propaganda in general, when you have intelligence, you also have counterintelligence. You need to find ways for states, or I don't know, different type of organizations to have those instruments to counter what's happening, but not to hurt the actual people and the actual networks, but to go around and go directly to the troll farms and to see who's behind them in a way or another. I don't have more answers, but I think this would be it.
No, it's very good, and some of the measures are already put in place. I mean, for instance, under the DSA, large social networks are obliged to create a registry of all the paid advertisements, who paid for them, in what period that advertisement was shown, transparency in political paid communication. These are measures that may want to make the marketing scheme behind maybe unethical communication or disinformation more apparent and easier to follow, to track, and even to dismantle if the case. Many measures target the artificial amplification of messages, as you said, as you mentioned, including through trolls. And also many measures focus on not punishing citizens for what they believe, but by sanctioning certain behaviors that are meant to artificially push ideas in untransparent, unethical ways. And also regarding audit, platforms are now obliged to make regular audits of the risks and also show how they are prepared to mitigate those risks. I'm not saying that enforcement of the DSA is easy, because it's not, especially since these companies are not based in Europe. And as you've seen, President Trump already described this type of attempt to clean up the digital space as a commercial act of war. So it's not easy. It is actually very complicated, but the pillars are there, and you kind of correctly identified some of the pillars. There are a lot of things to say, but maybe Paul, how should we do it next? I think we are 10 minutes behind schedule. Should I briefly answer to the remaining questions?
Well, actually, I was asking for Roxana because she was, she had most of the questions. She set up most of the questions, but as you already have them, maybe to economize time, just to try to give a brief answer to each point.
Okay, so the first point was that it was the question of weaponization of everyday grievances of people, such as living costs. My example actually is related to this type of weaponization of concerns about increasing costs. What can we do then? Well, first of all, as I said, we can trigger the fake amplification part, we can detox the algorithm and other measures that are related to the platforms. But for societal resilience in general, communication is not enough. I think we can go to another level and look at information warfare in general and see how usually these topics are weaponized, in my experience, by two types of actors: political actors who want a political gain, and I think in the domestic political arena we can try to expose their agendas. But on the other hand, we have other types of actors, including hostile states, that use these topics as part of information warfare. And here we have to have the security layer of the discussion into consideration. And you have to have measures that protect you from information warfare as part of hybrid warfare, so the discussion expands to security studies. Now, for the second question, disinformation often appears to target psychologically or socially vulnerable groups, and that's true. And how should policymakers and security practitioners approach resilience building under these conditions? I think that everything we discussed today contributes to this question. I would just add the idea that scholars in general and practitioners emphasize that we need to have a whole of society approach. That means including measures that rebuild social trust. Not only communication measures or technical measures to counter disinformation. Distrust in institutions cannot be solved if institutions do not become more trustworthy in the actual, in real life. Until then, you can try to mitigate the harms, and if you have a distrustful population, at least try to mitigate coordinated disinformation campaigns that weaponize this distrust. But to solve it, you have to have other types of political and social measures that go beyond the scope of our discussion. Then about disinformation that is spread in chunks and narratives constructed brick by brick, I think I already answered to this. Narratives of disinformation rely on storytelling techniques that are borrowed from marketing, and they create worldviews, world interpretations in which each piece of fake news makes sense. So to debunk disinformation narratives means to do more than correct the facts. You should also show people how their psychological vulnerabilities are being used, what are maybe the cognitive biases that are exploited by those narratives. And you have to present, of course, in an assertful and truthful and ethical way, alternative worldviews that are no longer supported by disinformation. You have to give them another outlook. And again, it's not easy, and it has to be, the effect of disinformation is cumulative. That means that the effect of countermeasures is also cumulative. We can't, with only one correction of the record, we can't hope that we solve Euroscepticism in Romania. And lastly, from statistical perspective, what disinformation subjects is the Romanian public most vulnerable? Well, one of the most, when we map these information narratives, the one that is most supported by the audience by far, it was at least 40% in the population, if I'm not mistaken, is that Romania is a colony of the West. and that the political establishment has sold Romania's interests to foreign corporations, to Soros, to, I don't know, depending on the usual scapegoat, so to speak. So this is maybe, I'd say that currently we have some polarizing issues that are related to tradition and religion, so the conservative perspective, and of course anti-EU sentiments based on the idea that Romania doesn't benefit from membership and it's continuously exploited. And of course we have unfortunately a growing problem with health misinformation and anti-vaccination sentiments. And that's very worrisome to me. And in general, an anti-science attitude and anti-establishment attitude that fits well with the idea that we are living in an age of network, because networks tend to oppose the establishment. And that's what we are living now, experiencing now. And most vulnerable groups, well, according to certain topics, for instance, we have certain profiles of the vulnerable individual. But for instance, belief in conspiracy theories has been connected with, to some extent, but not mainly, to education, but also a psychological profile, the way people tolerate uncertainty, anxiety, social media usage, intense social media usage increases vulnerability to disinformation. So there are some patterns that we can see. Sometimes they vary according to topic, but I'd say social media use, level of education, critical thinking skills, and some psychological traits. Some of them being, for instance, extent to which people tolerate uncertainty and tendency to see patterns where there are none for psychological comfort. And lastly, narcissism. People love to feel they are smarter, and this is why sometimes they believe fringe narratives, because they feel special, because they found out the truth that's very precious and contradicts the mainstream views of the sheep population, quote unquote. Okay, I hope I managed to answer the questions.
Yes, you did. Very interesting topics.
I'm sorry, there's been a lot of information, probably too much. I apologize for that.
Well, actually, this webinar series, I think, or at least the way I tried to conceive it, it was in a step-by-step perspective. So far you filled so many gaps of the previous webinars, because actually the previous previous webinar discussed about psychology a little bit and traits and what models of psychology emphasizes disinformation and in general information evaluation. What I would like to emphasize, the fact that recently in October last year, the Hybrid Center for Countering Hybrid Disinformation from the European Center for Countering Hybrid Threats from Helsinki published a research on disinformation, means to tackle it, from practical experience of stakeholders. And I would like to emphasize the model, the 4 lines of defense framework they proposed. And it's very easy to understand in my perspective. One, and we discussed today, detection of information, raising awareness, prevent repairing measures, and not lastly, the means to punish the perpetrators. I think that this is also a point we have to focus. We, society, I'm referring the whole of society, we have to focus more, because they kind of seem to walk freely with all the necessary commas. So Flavia, thank you very much. For me, it was a very interesting webinar. I'm asking the fellows if they have final remarks or questions to ask them now.
I have one short question.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to ask about, like, to continue what you said, your answer from the last question. You said when you finished speaking about this topic, that in order to try to diminish in a way or another polarization, you need to build bridges. what are those bridges from your point of view, or how you see it from your research? Did you see, at least maybe in smaller spaces, how polarization can be diminished, how people can get again together, not maybe not national level, but I don't know, in smaller kind of communities? Or what do you think about this? Which would be those bridges?
Well, I haven't researched it as in actual research, but I've thought about it and I read some things. So, for instance, bridges. What I mean by bridges, you have, and this I think I covered a little bit during the forum. We have, for instance, vulnerable groups that are not necessarily easily reachable online or are in some online bubbles that are difficult to reach. Let's not forget that within communities, we have some type of opinion leadership that we can access. For instance, if we have NGOs that work with vulnerable teens from troubled families, and for instance, there are initiatives that integrate these young people into different types of activities, they can spread positive messages, they can spread debunking. If we talk about health misinformation, we definitely need to see more coherence from the medical, from the professional side. You know that we have some outliers that contradict science openly. That's one way of burning the bridges, because if doctors cannot agree on the usefulness of vaccines in general, I mean, I'm not discussing the COVID vaccine in particular because that's more controversial, then how can you expect that you are able to help mothers feel more secure in vaccinating their children? So that's one type of intervention that needs to have the contribution of the medical expertise. Priests, given that in Romania, there are a lot of practitioners of the Orthodox religion, as in really practitioners, churchgoers, being able to co-opt the church in some, of course, truth-based, factual-based messages can be useful if this information circulates there, so to speak. That would be another. So go to communities, go to groups, and find leaders, opinion leaders in those communities that maybe would like to be part of your countering initiatives. It's a little bit idealistic what I'm saying now.
Yeah, but starting from grassroots upwards.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Who knows? Maybe maybe our fellows will, as a final project, they are supposed to do. They will put up a pitch to be presented to a group of priests in order to teach them how to identify and counter disinformation and how to spread this God's message, I would say, because I don't think that God wants us to be disinformed. He wants us to be smart and realize what's happening around us. Okay, and Roxana, I think you also have a question.
Yes, thank you so much for answering my questions. I know they were quite complex for a Q&A session, but I really appreciate the answers, and I wanted to ask if you have any recommendations for further reading. It could be anything, books or articles or podcasts, anything.
Well, I've already recommended 2 books today. So The Square and the Tower. I would also like to recommend Sinan Aral's Hive Machine book. Also an older book, but older, probably 2018-19, Like War. It's about the weaponization of social media. That's also an interesting read. We also have some European Parliament reports on computational propaganda and persuasion. You can, I don't know them by heart, but you can Google them. And I'm not trying to be modest or something, but I've recently contributed to a book that looks at unbalances and problems in the information ecosystem that in turn create troubles for democracies. And it's the type of state-of-the-art book. It's open access. So you can, I'm going to give you the link, just a second, in the chat.
Well, actually, I also have the link I can.
Yeah, if you have it. But I
yes.
think I found it. But I
Yes.
think I found it.
Oh, perfect. It is here.
Okay, and I'm going to share it. And there you can see what we know from the perspective of research. So we consulted probably around, if I'm not mistaken, 3,000 academic sources, out of which we maintained for the book 1,600 something sources that we analyzed from the perspective of a number of research questions. So it can be informative, and we also have a small section. It was not meant to be a policy brief, but we have a section about some recommendations that you maybe can find interesting. And otherwise, we continuously see new books being written about this. I can also recommend a book from Alina Bârgăuanu on fake news. She's a member in multiple high-level expert groups on topics related to cognitive warfare, fight against disinformation. We've written some stuff together, so I recommend her book. The book, I think, was published around 2018, so you have that in mind. But if you want to understand the general settings surrounding the concept of fake news, all the conclusions in the book still stand.
Thank you so much.
But it's in Romanian, her book. I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. It was a pleasure hearing your views, and thank you, Paul, for having me. I appreciate it.
We thank you. Hopefully, we will finalize this fellowship with an on-site or at least hybrid event. We want to have Youth Resilience Day to present the projects they are going to work to. And in any case, you will receive an invitation to attend and support us and see your work today at the webinar. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. If you agree, I will share the presentation, and we keep in touch for further engagement occasions. Thank you so much, Flavia. Have a great evening.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Congratulations, fellows. You're great. You rock.